everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So in this one here, I actually wanted to talk about Rick Grimes and his arrival to the CRM, and I wanted to kind of talk about, I guess, flashbacks and sort of the timeline of this show and also of the Walking Dead just universe shows in general, and just talk about how they're related and how some of the shows could catch up, because a lot of characters are just sort of everywhere right now. So I want to talk about all of that. Also, at the end of this, I am going to attach a Q&A section because I figured it's Sunday and there's still some questions that I saw in the Discord that I didn't get to. So I'm going to get to those questions here at the end of this. So before we go any further, obviously, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. Daryl Dixon is premiering in 3 weeks from now, and then Fear the Walking Dead is obviously premiering in 9 weeks. There's going to be a lot to talk about. Rick and Michonne, the teasers and stuff for all of that are likely going to be dropping, really at any point once Daryl Dixon is actually airing. I imagine we're going to be getting like these 10 to 15 second little teasers, just like we got for Dead City. And if it doesn't air during Daryl Dixon, it's probably going to air, I'm assuming, during Fear the Walking Dead. So yes, there's going to be a lot to talk about, so definitely hit subscribe. So in terms of the timeline for the Rick and Michonne show, I'm not entirely sure of when it's set because we haven't got that official confirmation yet. Like, you know, when you're looking at the final scene there in The Walking Dead, the Rick stuff is obviously set in the past at some point. It's set sometime before season 10, because in that scene, he throws that bottle, right? And also he has the phone, and that phone Michonne finds later on, and that phone is like in a bag, and it's like inside this case inside the boat and stuff. So obviously, whatever happens to it is like much later. So that scene that we have of Rick Grimes, that could be from like literally 2 or 3 years after All Out War. Like that could have been 5 years ago already in the timeline, right? Like that was at some point a long time ago. So after that, he was still taken in and held captive for many years, right? And we don't know what he's been up to. Obviously, we did get that teaser recently at Comic-Con where we do see Rick, and you know, there's still some questions on that. Like, is that set in the current timeline? I do think it is overall. I do think that is a current timeline Rick. We're not seeing like, you know, the flashbacks as to how he got to the shore or whatever, where he did get captured by that helicopter. So I think that is actually a current timeline Rick. Michonne, obviously, in the final scene, that was more current. Like that was more set in like just that timeline right there, where she is still out there looking for him, right? So to me, you know, I think in terms of the timeline, I mean, first of all, let's talk about the other two shows. So Dead City is set a few years after the finale of The Walking Dead, right? Like it's set maybe 2 or 3 years. I've heard some people say 5 or 6 years. I don't think it's been that long. I know there was some stuff mentioned. I don't know, but I know that's the show that's the furthest in the timeline for sure. Daryl Dixon, I believe, is set within a year or something after the finale. So it's like pretty much right away. Like after he leaves, you know, he's out there for maybe 6 months, maybe up to a year at the absolute most. And then obviously he ends up in France and whatever. The Ones Who Live, that could be set 5 years into the future. I mean, not 10 years into the future, but we have no idea. Like we absolutely have no idea. But there's this feeling that I have that the first season is likely going to be set around the current events of Daryl Dixon. So maybe like a year after the finale, somewhere around there. Because you got to remember too, like Daryl hasn't found Rick yet, right? And that's the biggest thing that you have to remember. So Daryl, his main mission is to go and search for Rick. Like that's all he wants to do, is he wants to go and search for Rick. And obviously within that year, he ends up in France and he still hasn't found Rick yet, right? So if Rick came back with Michonne to the Civic Republic, he would have gotten word of that. So I think that to me confirms that Rick and Michonne will be set at least at some point after the Daryl Dixon show. So you also got to take into account that season 2 is going to be happening and Carol will likely be there. And unless Carol mentions something like, oh yeah, Rick got back already, like he made it home with Michonne, which I don't see happening. Like I just don't see that happening. I literally don't see a scene like that ever happening. Then yeah, it still tells me that Rick and Michonne is likely set still after Daryl Dixon, around the same time or afterwards. And so that's why I think a lot of the more current timeline stuff is going to make a lot of sense. And yes, it doesn't really, I guess, make sense in terms of Dead City being so far away. I really feel like the only reason why they did that was to get Herschel to be older. I don't think it was anything to do with some sort of storyline to make it so that, I don't know, like they were set so much into the future and it was gonna somehow be revealed, where Maggie and Negan discussed the fact that, oh yeah, like, do you remember a couple years ago when Rick made it back home? Like, I don't see that ever happening. Like, that's just kind of ridiculous. So I think, to me, it really was just they wanted Herschel to be a lot older, just because I think story-wise it makes a lot of sense. You don't want him to be kind of the same age or a couple years older than he was during, the final season of The Walking Dead. You want him to be at least a teenager. It creates a lot more, problems, a lot more of a story and stuff like that. You can actually get an actor that can have a lot of dialogue and whatnot. And I really do think that that's pretty much the only reason here. But in terms of the Rick and Michonne show and talking about the flashbacks and all that, I really do think that we are going to get a lot of flashbacks. I think that out of all 3 shows, this one is probably going to be the one with, well, I don't want to say the most flashbacks, but I guess the most flashbacks early on, because I still think we're going to get that scene of Rick arriving to the CRM. Like, it would just be kind of insane to start that show and to not ever really address that. And I'm just thinking about it in terms of just being a casual viewer, right? Like, the last time you may have saw Rick, well, I guess you would have saw him on The Walking Dead there in the finale, but he was taken in that helicopter, and that was basically it. There's a lot of mystery surrounding just what he's up to and all of that. I think it makes a lot of sense that for the audience, unless they're going to kind of keep it as a part of a story reveal, I still think it makes a lot of sense just to kind of show us that scene. I don't know if the opening minutes would be that. I used to always think that maybe the opening minutes would be that. If anything, I kind of feel like it's going to be one of those things where it's the opening minutes of like episode 2 kind of thing. It's unrelated. It's just a scene that we're going to get, and then it cuts into something else. Or maybe it's connected with something with Jadis and some sort of reveal there, right? Because obviously there was some stuff that went down there when Rick was taken in. He was obviously traded to the CRM, and Jadis is the one that did that. So there's going to be some sort of story there that, obviously hypes up Jadis. And I think that's where we could get the scene. Like, I think episode 2, if Jadis shows up in that episode specifically, then that could be a flashback scene in the very opening minutes. And then somehow that scene will connect to a reveal at the end of episode 2, where maybe it's revealed that, Jadis did something, or it's, I don't know, something like that. You know what I mean? I could see it playing out like that. I don't think it's going to be sort of a episode 1 opening minutes type of thing. In terms of Michonne's storyline, I don't think there's going to be a lot of flashbacks for Michonne, except for the fact that I guess she did meet this new group. The only reason why I say that is because there's not really a lot of story to tell there, but there could be. That's the thing, there could be. I'm just more going based off of the fact that I don't really know what the story is, right? Like, if you think of Dead City, like look at how many flashbacks they had, and there's no way I could have predicted those flashbacks before watching the show. So we'll have to wait and see what the story actually is. There could be some stuff with Michonne meeting, certain characters in that new group that she's a part of. And that's what I'm so excited about for that show, is like Michonne is a part of this really massive group, and this group travels everywhere. And just, I want to know more about that. I really want to know more about what Michonne's been up to, because we kind of know what Rick's been up to, right? He's been at the CRM the entire time. We kind of get the idea as to just, how he's been the entire time. But Michonne, we really don't know what Michonne's been up to. Like, she's obviously with that group, and I'm just kind of picturing her, just looking for clues and just kind of looking around, obviously, and putting everything together to try and find Rick. But like, I just want to know more specifically what her lifestyle is like right now. Like, what is her day-to-day life like right now? You know what I mean? It's easy with Rick. Like, we kind of know that. With Michonne, we have no idea. So I guess there's a lot of that they could address with Michonne as well in the first episode. And I think they probably will. Now that I'm seeing a lot of the footage for this show, it really seems like I think this show it's going to be pretty much their stories completely like combined. And I think that the first episode, because I used to think that the first episode would just focus on Rick entirely, and then the second episode would be Michonne, but maybe Michonne would show up at the end of the first episode as like I don't know, just like sort of a cliffhanger type of thing. I don't think it's going to be that. I mean, I do wonder how they're going to juggle it, 2 storylines like that. I think that's why they probably are going to reunite sooner rather than later, because it's something that would just feel a little off if for like 6 episodes you have 2 storylines that you're focusing on, and then they eventually reunite in the finale. You know what I mean? It's kind of a lot to do that. So I think it makes sense to have them reunite early, like in episode 3 or something. This way, it's like, you only have to focus on that separate storyline stuff for 2 episodes, and then they're reunited in episode 3 or whatever. And then for the rest of the season, you just, their storylines are combined, and you can just kind of focus just on that, right? It's a little bit easier. It's a little bit more simple. That's the thing too. I am wondering about some of those aspects, because the group that Michonne is with, like what? So if Michonne finds Rick, is she just done with that group? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of questions I have about that. Like, will that group still play a role in the series? Like what happens afterwards with that group? There's just a lot of questions I have. Like this show is going to introduce so much stuff that I'm so hyped for. And so, yeah, I do think overall we are going to get a lot of flashbacks, and for sure, Rick Grimes, I think there's a lot of flashbacks that can happen because, again, he's been there for years. Like Rick has been there for many, many years, right? And I mean, I think in total it could be, I mean, it's a long, long time, right? So there's a lot that they can tell with Rick. It's going to be so cool to catch up with them. I really cannot wait for the show to premiere. So let's get into the Q&A section here because I did actually want to get into this. So my first Q&A, this is just a theory. If Carol does return at some point in season 2, how cool do you think it would be if an older Judith and older RJ are with Carol? I mean, that would be really cool for sure. I just don't see it happening just because I don't see Carol bringing them to France because it's kind of dangerous. So it would be cool to see them for sure, but I just don't realistically see that happening. Your second question, at the end of season 2 of the Daryl Dixon show, what if Daryl somehow finds Rick and he is wearing the CRM jacket from the end of the final season of the main show, and Rick informs Daryl and Carol about the CRM, which causes a massive war at some point in the Walking Dead universe? Well, you know, in terms of a war and all that, I could see that happening at some point for sure. There's going to be something that happens between the Commonwealth and the CRM. And I say Commonwealth because obviously with our characters, if they're going to need, you know, resources or anything, they're going to get the Commonwealth's help, right? So there's definitely something that could happen at some point in the future. I do think it is likely going to happen. I don't know in what capacity. Honestly, I don't really know in what capacity because it's so hard to say. Like, I'm picturing this really crazy thing to happen, but I don't know if we're going to get that. You know, it's so hard to say because of, I guess, just where the shows are at right now. You know what I mean? Like, we're sort of starting up again. And yes, they are sort of connecting things here and there, but it's hard to say if we're going to get like this gigantic war kind of thing. You know, I'm picturing it like that, but I don't think it's going to necessarily play out like that. Q&A, in your most recent video, you talked about the Walmart collection DVD, but remember the UK exclusive Legacy Edition Blu-ray with the exclusive artwork and deleted scenes and commentary. Oh yeah, actually, you know, I do remember that. I do remember seeing this. Like, this is actually something I would totally get. Yeah, for sure. And you did mention you're talking about the 4K version. You don't want to get a 4K version because it will be upscaled. And yeah, I guess that makes sense for sure. Yeah, definitely. Q&A, now that Troy's return to Fear the Walking Dead has officially been confirmed, do you think he will survive season 8 and get his own spinoff? Well, I don't see him getting his own spinoff, but will he survive season 8? It's possible, I guess. At this point, why kill him off when you just brought him back and everyone thought he was dead the entire time? Yeah, I'll say that he's probably going to survive. I think that makes the most sense. Q&A, how do you think Troy is going to react when he sees Madison? Unlike the Croat with Negan, do you think he'll be wanting revenge? I think he will be wanting revenge for sure. I think that when he does see Madison, it's probably going to be one of those things where, I don't know, I don't think he's going to want to like kill her immediately. Like, I'm not entirely sure of what the storyline is going to be with Padre and all that, because Padre, like, they technically just have Padre now and they're just doing whatever. But how does Troy factor into this, and what's the overall story here going to be? Because it's going to be something that is wrapped up pretty fast because there's only 6 episodes. So it's kind of hard to say, but I do think Troy is going to want revenge. I don't see it being where he wants Madison to be on his side. Like, I don't see that being the case. I think the Croat wanted that, but the Croat was instructed by the Dama. I think overall it makes sense that Troy is probably going to want revenge. And I see that happening. I think that's the most likely scenario. So anyways, I'm going to leave it here. Make sure to post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.